Good evening. Good evening. And good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains, episode number 1028. This is for Monday, the 29th of September, 2025. You know what this is? It's the pre-show, the magical, mystical part of the program where we typically do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say some very outrageous things. Okay, so we're wrapping up September. Hard to believe it. Down to 3 months left. The final quarter of 2025. October starts this week. And I must say, October, I do believe, is my very favorite month of the year. And typically, where we are, the weather tends to be very quiet and calm. And then in November, everything breaks loose and it's tornado season. The only thing that can disrupt October typically here from being calm is a tropical type system. And it sure looks like we will not have that issue for the next 10 days or so. But anyway, glad you're here. And we're coming to you from the Alabama Weather Network Studio B. We're all is calm this evening, watching the sun setting here. So all is well. But if anybody on the show has anything you need to share that's obnoxious, outrageous, this is the time to do it because the official recording doesn't begin for another 7 minutes, John. I can see you laughing. You got something you need to say, outrageous.
Yeah, Penn State is a basketball school.
Wow. Wow. Okay. That's John at johnneese.com for the haters that want to send hate mail.
How are you, Jim?
Good. Hey, John, is your new mic working? That fancy new mic?
How's that sound? Sound good?
Yeah, man. Sounds great.
I got
Sounds
it because
really
of
good.
you. This
Man,
is the James right here.
oh, you got the all black version. Yes. Nice. All right, let's see here.
Did you guys hear me at all? It's Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff, you doing all right?
Yeah. You're
Good.
down in Alabama, huh?
Look good, sound good.
Good.
You got James ate. James ate a lot. I got a weird situation here we need to talk about.
What did I break now?
Well, I want you to explain this.
Yeah, I kept seeing all the storm chasers at the state fair running to one end of the midway, and that's why they came to see the giant funnels. Look at 'em all.
Funnels. Wow, that's an assortment there. I'm trying to see. I see peanut butter cup, banana cream. Oh, wait a minute. What is that? Yeah, banana.
Marshmallow, chocolate, strawberry, Oreo,
And I
maple.
see the original there in the middle.
Yeah.
There's a low-fat chocolate. It's low fat.
What?
I don't believe you. In the words of Ron Burgundy.
Yeah. It's less
So
fat than having two of them.
Where was this and when was this?
That was about 50 minutes ago at the Tulsa State Fair. I'm out doing
wow.
live shots and hustled back to do a little brainsing. But yeah, it's quite the event. They actually have a great run of weather. No rain for 10 days. They're very happy.
I did the weather at the State Fair of Texas. The years I was in Dallas, I was there for an entire week, and they put me in front of big techs, and they had some pretty
Howdy,
mean funnel
folks.
cakes.
Welcome
Howdy,
to the great
folks.
State Fair of Texas.
Texas, big techs. Channel 4 News, Dallas Fort Worth, with Clarice Tinsley, Steve Bosch, James Spann, and Paul Crane on sports. I can hear
There
that
you
in my
go.
head, and this was 100 years ago, before you were born. Um, we,
Alexander
this is
Bell
what
had just invented the TV.
Yeah. Hey, John, we got to fix your audio. We got to fix your audio. So is that a Bluetooth connection or a wired connection?
It's a Bluetooth.
It sounds like the Bluetooth is a little intermittent.
Let me play with it.
And I we want your audio to be perfectly, that mic sounds so good. Tap on that mic and let's be sure that that's what we're hearing.
Ah,
No,
No.
we're hearing your earbuds.
it's the
That's the
earbuds.
problem.
Uh-huh.
When you use those earbuds, the Bluetooth is flaky. When you use that nice mic, it's perfect.
Do you
So
have a
you're-
blue, John? Is that what you have?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Get some
get
just
in there and
wired AirPod, just some regular cheap earbuds and plug them into the blue, and it'll work.
Into the blue.
Yeah, just some
But
$2.
what you can do on Zoom is go to audio and
You could
choose
do
your
that.
mic. Choose your mic and then choose your speaker as whatever you want it to be. Your earbuds there, and just pick that fancy blue mic as your mic, and that will
Right.
fix everything. The
But
world will be a better
you can
place.
plug some nice little wired, earbuds into that blue, and it'll be your audio if you want.
How's it now?
That's
Oh
good.
yeah.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Now we need your earbuds back in though, so we don't hear the feedback from us.
Yeah.
I'll keep working on this.
And what you do is just choose the earbuds. Your earbuds is your audio out. Your audio speaker in Zoom. You click that little up arrow by the audio button, and you'll see the choices you can make there. So, but that mic's, I knew it when John got on the show that he was using those the earbuds audio, which can be a little flaky. That blue mic sounds good. The melodious tones of the John Gordon. It's no better. It's no better, and we don't want it disrupted by a Bluetooth anomaly.
That's a great band name.
That's a great show title, but we can't use it because we're not at the top of the hour here. Bluetooth anomaly.
Sunday.
So once we hit the top of the hour, we can start that as in exactly 1 minute. So if anybody needs to say something really outrageous, this is your chance.
Very good.
Penn State is a wrestling school.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Hi, Dr.
John
Deese.
at johnneese.com. That's the email
Is
address for the haters that are.
Well,
Is that
there's
Jen Nairmore?
some truth to it.
It is Jen Nairmore. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm okay. I think I've slowly recovered from Saturday night, but
Yeah,
hey, what are you gonna do?
the sun came up.
I still fondly remember my trip up there to see you, Dr. Neese.
Oh, I have pictures to prove it. Yeah,
Did
That
Bill
was-
did Bill have his pants on?
I believe he did. I believe he did.
His
Okay.
own, not somebody else's.
At least while I was with Dr. Neese.
At least when he was in public.
Yeah, there you go. And let's
Baby
welcome our
steps.
top of the it's top of the hour. Welcome to our television folks that are joining us here. This is Monday night. It's WeatherBrains. We have no weather issues. So before we get the good stuff going here, let's roll. We're gonna roll track 1. We're gonna roll track 2. Here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains.
Wait. I'm hearing myself come back through somebody's channel here. Let me try that again. If everybody can put in headsets or mute. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Well, that's what Bill Curtis says. Kind of a big deal. WeatherBrains, episode 1028, 1028. For the 29th of September, 2025, we are into official fall in terms of astronomy. We are past the equinox now. So the question is, James ate a lot. Is it cool down at all in Tulsa town? Are you cool and crisp?
We have had really nice evenings and really nice mornings, but the afternoons do get kind of toasty, upper 80s. Humidity not too bad, dew point around 60. So compared to the way it was all summer, yeah, it's remarkably nice.
Yeah, we've had the same thing here. The dew points are low, so it's we mid to upper 80s during the day, and we cool down very effectively at night, which has been very nice. And we've had no weather issues here. Let's go to Jen Naramore, and it's time to play the guessing game. Where's Jen this week?
Jen is still in Birmingham, but not for much longer. My time here is almost through, and I will be heading south and be making my way down to Florida. So I've enjoyed my time here. It's been great. I went to Guin this weekend and saw the mayor, hung out with him and his wife, and we retraced the steps of the tornado from 74 one more time to kind of finish up our summary. And met one of the residents who really helped us with our 18 chapter narrative. He was so awesome and drove us around. And then we had dinner with the mayor and his wife. And then we went to church with them yesterday at the First Baptist that was hit in 74. So it's like family now going there. I love that community and have just fallen in love with everyone there. So it's been it's been a great time. I've had some great food. Bill has made sure that I've eaten some really yummy food, and hopefully we can do one more restaurant tomorrow when I come hang out with the crew at the Alabama Weather Network.
We're going
Now,
to
now is the mayor's
very
hair
famous steam table tomorrow, James. A very famous steam table tomorrow.
Ooh.
a steam table? Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I can't wait. But so, is the mayor's hair moved at all, Jen?
No, it still looks fantastic. It looks
Now,
great.
he's probably
No.
watching, so don't be saying
Phil,
that about the mayor's
Phil has
hair.
the best hair of any elected official in the world. I mean, the hair is just stunning. But no, Guin was a life changer for me. I was in high school. I was a senior. I had a ham radio license. They desperately needed communication volunteers. I was given the time off, and I literally thought the world was ending. I was a kid that loved storms and loved tornadoes and couldn't wait for them. And you just don't think about the negative downside of these things. And I guess it was something that I had to experience. But yeah, Guin is always a very special place. So Jen will be headed down to the beach to her beach retreat, her beach home she has down with Coach Saban. Bill, where's Coach Saban's house? Is it Palm Beach or Fort Lauderdale?
Oh, there's no telling. He probably got homes on
It's
the French
somewhere
Riviera.
down there, yeah, north of Miami. So that we'll look for your pictures. I do see that Kim has joined us. Kim, I don't think Rick is. I think Rick Smith is on the road, so you'll be our official Norman, Oklahoma City correspondent. Kim, how are you tonight, Commissioner? What's on your mind?
Oh, doing great. And actually right in the middle of our EMS Council fall meeting. So we were doing 2 virtual days. So getting to wear my commissioner hat, very, very fun. I just want to second what James Adelot said. A lot of the joy I've had is from the cool mornings, the cool evenings, dew points below 60. That's where I get just really happy. Like above 60 is just tough, but below that, you start to actually feel what can actually be called cool, crisp kind of air. And we've been waking up every morning with dew. Everything is just dew soaked every morning, which all of us dog owners relish. What a time. What a time. But I'll take it for the cool. I'll bear with it. I'll bear with it. We're doing all right over here.
So our working show title is Dew Soaked right now, but that could easily change as this show progresses. So let's go to John Gordon. John has spent some time in an undisclosed location far, far away, but he's back. He made the tail end of the show last week, and he was on a tear. He was on a total tear. So, John, has your blood pressure come down at all?
Yes. Hello, James. It's so nice to be here. I want to say this, but I don't know if John Neese can even let me say this, but we are in Indian summer. Is that allowed to be said anymore, or is that a bad word?
No. I was told never say that, never. So
John Neese, what do you say for this? What's the new terminology?
Well, I'm not acknowledging that there is a new terminology. I say second summer. I mean, I've always said second summer, actually. Um, so, yeah, it's not something I've thought about.
All right. Well,
And we're having
there you go.
one. We're having a very nice one.
Second summer. There you go. That's the appropriate title. So, John, otherwise, how are you doing? You look good.
It's great to be back. I went to Ireland. Everyone should go to Ireland. Get the insurance for the rental car. The driving is insane. Insane. I had at least 20 near misses every day. Just nuts.
All right. So John, we're going to do a little live test here. Tap that mic 3 times and let's see.
Yeah, I'm going to get someone
And
to
that's
help me
not.
here, so I'll be off.
Yeah, that's
I'll
not
be
the
off
one
the
that's
air
going out
shortly.
over the air right now. We're getting
I'm
your
gonna work
earbud
on it.
audio. Yep. Okay. We have an official audio expert coming in here. Let's go down to Troy, who's melting down in Texas. Troy, what's going on down there?
I beg your pardon. We only got down officially to about 90 or 91 today, but that's because of a deck of mid and high level clouds that came in this afternoon and held the temperature down. But looking at 90s for the next couple of weeks. And what's really interesting down here is even if you go out and look at the GFS, the European model, don't really see any precipitation down here for the next month. I mean, for not the next month, but at least the next 2 or 3 weeks. You just don't see it. The 8 to 14 day began to suggest something today, but it does that every other day. So we won't too much with that. But really, GFS and European both very, very dry for at least the next 2 weeks down here. And drought is getting worse once again down here after the summer floods.
All right, Bill Murray, let me toss it to you. Let's bring in our guests, and you can officially introduce them. We got a good show tonight.
Yeah, James, I'm really excited about tonight's show. Our first guest WeatherBrain tonight is a teaching professor of meteorology at Penn State, former Weather Channel storm analyst, co-author of the Philadelphia area weather book. Just an amazing friend and somebody we've missed, hadn't had on here in way too long. Dr. John Neese, it was so nice to get your email. And I had your book sitting right over here to read, and I hadn't even made the connection. You and Jeff made a cool book about, one of my favorite subjects, and I didn't even know about it. How did this happen?
This happened because Jeff Harding, who I'm sure you'll introduce soon, a licensed Gettysburg battlefield guide, contacted me about 7 years ago and said, John, everybody asks about the weather during the battle. What do you know? Can you help us figure out what the heat index was? Because we know what the temperature probably was, but what did it really feel like? And that's where it started.
I'm going to circle back to you after I introduce our second guest tonight. But he is, as you said, John, a licensed battlefield guide at Gettysburg, a historian, author of the book Lost Love Story, Gettysburg's Lost Love Story, and 33 years with naval intelligence. Jeffrey Harding, thank you for being here tonight. And I'm so thankful that you got my email because Dr. John Neese, my emails were going in spam for him. So I'm glad you got it.
I'm glad to be on board with you, gentlemen. Thanks for hosting us.
I went to Gettysburg, and I love the Shelby Foote series. As a matter of fact, I'm actually listening to the Shelby Foote series now on Audible. I'm in the 3rd book right now, and the reader of the book, the narrator, calls it Gettysburg, and I'm like, I never heard it said that way. Is that the right way?
That is
Jeff?
the right way. And I don't even live in
Gettysburg.
town, I hate to tell you, but I learned that. It's Gettysburg indeed.
I've always called it Gettysburg, like some rube or something. And
you're in the majority probably, but the local folk up there definitely call it Gettysburg.
Well, I figured it wouldn't have made it into Audible if it weren't too correct. So I'm now steeped in Gettysburg. So I will say it right for the rest of the life. And I was in a subtler shop in Gettysburg there in 1998, and I saw a beautiful federal lieutenant general's uniform, and I thought I've just got to have that uniform, and so I bought it, and I brought it back to Alabama, and some reenactors once asked me if I wanted to be a reenactor, and I thought, yeah, I'd love to be a reenactor. I said, I've even got this fabulous uniform. And I got this real funny pause. And they said, well, you don't start out as a general, right? And I was like, oh, what do you mean? They're like, no, you start out as a private and you work your way up. And I'm like, oh no, this is like the real thing, huh? I was like, no, I don't. Yeah, okay. Well, y'all go on, and I'll watch y'all with the reenactment stuff because the real thing sounds a little rough. But I had a licensed guide the day I went on the battlefield.
Good.
And you may have had, I doubt it was you, Jeff, but whoever that gentleman was one of the best investments I've ever made in my Civil War, studies. I think that, the comedian, what's his name, John Mulaney, said his dad studied World War II like there was always a pop quiz the next morning. That's kind of me in the Civil War. I study it. My wife says like there's a pop quiz the next morning, and so I of course ate up every minute of it. Couldn't get enough of it. But
I bet you did. You were all in. Good. How long did you do? 2 hours, 4 hours, 6? What'd you do?
I think it was a 4 hour one.
4, nice.
We went everywhere, and he pulled off at every place, and I think he enjoyed it because I wanted to really dig in.
Yeah.
Because I had read Shelby Foote and really I wanted to go see these places.
Exactly.
Because it's amazing, that that era of our history is so amazing. What people sacrificed on both sides, what they went through, the physical sacrifice, and you guys touch on this in the book, because they were exposed to the elements every step of the way, and I felt the weight of that, wherever I read the book, because I was always sensitive to the weather entries, because they would talk about slogging through the mud, or the extreme cold, or the extreme heat, or all these things. So I was always sensitive to those portions. And sometimes they would rise to the level that I would pull them out. And Jen knows this. I would put them in my weather history. So much so that I ended up with a talk that I would give, to groups about times that weather influenced, battles in the Revolutionary War and in the Civil War, and I loved those studies. So I couldn't wait to get your book when it came out. And then when I put two and two together, John, that it was actually you that wrote it, I should have known that you were behind it. But I had just.
Niece.
What was that, John?
John Niece. He used to pitch for the Mets, but he spelled his name differently.
And so, but I still think so fondly of my trip to Penn State several years ago when Alabama played during one of Coach Paterno's last seasons. And when they were talking about the creamery on game day on Saturday, I thought very fondly of my Peachy Paterno that I had.
There you go.
At the creamery, and getting to come to the meteorology department, and getting to tailgate with the AccuWeather folks. And
yeah, we did have a good time. I think Alabama spanked Penn State that day.
I don't know if it was a spanking. I think it was more like our game with Georgia this weekend. You just, at the end of the game, you were just thankful that it was an incredible game. I don't know if there was any spanking going on. But there was always such a respect between the Alabama and the Penn State fans, and certainly between the teams because of Coach Bryant and Coach Paterno. And I don't want to turn this into football brains because James is going to blow the whistle
Yeah.
any second here, and we're going to get a flag. But there was tremendous respect between those two programs for sure. So let's get into the content here, and dig into it. So you talked about what flipped the light bulb for the project, but talk about the NOAA reanalysis capability and why that was so important. Johnny, you go first, I guess, because I guess Jeff kind of walked into all that part of it.
Right. Well, I had seen the NOAA reanalysis used for some other 19th century events, and I thought it would be interesting to see what it showed for the Gettysburg campaign. And so I basically plotted every 500 millibar map, every sea level pressure map, every 700 millibar relative humidity map I could get off of the NOAA reanalysis, along with the uncertainty estimates, and just tried to start matching those maps to what the soldiers were telling us, and matching them with the surface observations that we had. So it was really kind of a three-dimensional puzzle with what the soldiers told us in a qualitative sense, what the observations told us quantitatively, but they were widely spaced, and then what the NOAA reanalysis could suggest about the location of various pressure systems and how that was consistent with the observations.
And talk about the diaries, the soldiers' diaries that you had access to, because those are just priceless, I think. And when I hear their words, when I hear an author quote their words directly, it's so meaningful to me. And talk about how that spoke to both of you, if it did. I assume it did.
Oh, yeah, that's really the game changer when you're doing your research, Bill, and you start getting into these letters and diaries and all the firsthand accounts. And we even thought so much of it. I don't know if you noticed in the book, we ran an image of one particular individual of what his diary looked like. And I mean, this thing's so small, yet he's making these copious notes about his experiences and great detail. And we were real pleased to be able to show that and include so many quotes. But this stuff was our ground truth. And these guys wrote extensively about it because they're living outdoors. But we wanted to, run that up against what the observers were saying, and then ultimately the reanalysis program to try to get the big picture. And that's where John got into his laboratory and went wild with all that. And we had a lot of fun with it. Too much probably, but also some moments there that would stop you. Reading the account of Marcus Buck, who wasn't an official observer. He was a farmer out in Front Royal, Virginia, and had a winery and kept notes every day in his diary about the weather. And that was an amazing source because we didn't have any official observers to speak of in Virginia. Most of them went belly up during the Civil War, not able to report. They're trying to hang on tooth and nail. This guy's keeping a diary, and he writes in there one day about, basically a black cloud flowed in over his home that day. And when he got the news that his son had been wounded in a nearby battle, and his son was in the 7th Virginia Cavalry. And sure enough, he makes his way over there to the battlefield and finds out en route that his son's been killed. And, when you're thumbing through these diaries for weather information, and you read that, it sort of stops you in your tracks, And
it does.
Makes you appreciate what these people, like you said earlier, what they went through.
It's just unbelievable to me, for sure. I every time I read an account, I'm touched and moved in some way, shape, form, or fashion every single night when I listen. And I'd already read these books a long time ago. I used to read them when I would go to the battlefields. I would sit at Manassas or Antietam, because these battlefields are preserved. Not so much Gettysburg, because when I went, I had a guide. But when I went by myself to Antietam or to Manassas or to Chancellorsville or to the Wilderness, I would literally sit in place where the battle happened and surround myself with the information and just be blown away that I could transport myself back 130 years, 135 years, and suddenly live, in the middle of these Americans who were fighting for causes they believed in, whether they were, right, wrong, or indifferent. They were giving everything they had. And they changed the face of warfare. They changed, so many things. And our country became greater for it. I finally went to Appomattox and I stood there and I was just grateful that they got to Appomattox, you know. And I thought General Grant, who was my personal favorite hero, was so gracious. And if President Lincoln hadn't been assassinated, I think things would have been a lot different in our country. Because Grant went there that day with the spirit of conciliation, and General Lee, was there, in a very humble spirit. And I think our country could have gone a long way if that could have continued, if John Wilkes Booth had not done what he did. And I went and followed in his footsteps too. I traced his footsteps from Ford Theater all the way to where he was caught and killed. So this has meant a lot to me, that part of American history. So getting to read this book and really dig into the weather has been really a fascinating thing for me. Talk about the observations that were available then, because you just said, Jeffrey, that there weren't a lot, but there were some. And John, talk about what was available back then. How much of the Smithsonian Network was available? What happened to it? The Naval Observatory, and what else was out there?
That was pretty much it. I mean, I think for us, the gold mine was the Naval Observatory data, which had been highly underutilized in any previous work done about the weather of the Gettysburg campaign. I mean, just to be clear, there was an observer in Gettysburg as part of the Smithsonian Meteorological Project. There were two observers in Harrisburg, one in Philadelphia, one in Frederick. The observer in Frederick stopped observing at the end of June 1863, so we don't have those observations for July of 1863. Then you had across the mountain, you had a couple observers in the Pittsburgh area. Those were the primary ones surrounding Gettysburg and the ones we tapped into. There was an observer in Annapolis as well. So, but it was the Naval Observatory was unique because they had a max-min thermometer and they observed every 3 hours. And they observed wet bulb temperature, which enables you to get dew point. And so for those periods of time when the armies were reasonably close to Washington, D.C., if I could convince myself that the armies were in the same general air mass as Washington, D.C. was, you can do a lot with those numbers, even though they're not in Washington, D.C. So it was a little bit of juggling between, could you make a good meteorological argument that what was happening at the Naval Observatory could be applied to the armies? And I think that was the big deal for me. That was the big ticket item. In addition, the observer in Gettysburg didn't observe wet bulb temperature. So you had no ability to get the dew point or therefore the heat index in Gettysburg using solely the Gettysburg observer. So what we did during the battle was we merely extrapolated from Harrisburg, which is only 35 miles up the road. And when you look at the reanalysis maps, you realize right away that Gettysburg and Harrisburg were in the same air mass during the battle. It's one of those classic on the backside of a high pressure system, seen it a million times in July in South Central Pennsylvania. Yeah.
You kind of that anticyclone,
Yep.
that anticyclonic flow.
And you could just see it. Ludlam wrote a paper in 1960 in Weatherwise magazine about the weather during the battle, and he referenced at that time sort of a Bermuda High type situation. Amazing deductions from what he had at his disposal at that point. But we expanded a little bit upon that and really watched the development of this Bermuda High, and the flow went southerly, and it all made sense actually for the battle. It all made sense.
Well, my 1960 weatherwises may come home tomorrow. Do you still have 1960, Jen, or is it
Yeah.
already back home?
No, and I remember this article. I took a picture of it.
Did you?
So I could document it for Bill. But yeah, that was in there. Such great stuff. Weatherwises are amazing.
They sure are.
Yeah, what a classic treasure. But talk about both of you for a second. John, you go first. What happened when the data disagreed with the diaries? How did you reconcile that?
Well, the data, of course, none of the soldiers' accounts had anything quantitative. It's all qualitative. And I mean, I think there was enough consistency between the cumulative sort of average soldier report and the data that there weren't a lot of days that left me scratching my head. And to be clear, we covered the whole Gettysburg campaign, 42 days, June 3rd to July 15th. The battle was in the middle. Of course, it's summer, so it would be no surprise if one soldier reported a shower and another didn't. One reported a thunderstorm and another didn't. But the consistency was generally there. That I didn't have a lot of days where I was questioning. I was questioning the soldiers' thinking, and I certainly wasn't going to question the observations, particularly those from the Naval Observatory, which were very high quality.
Anything to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, so I mean, we were fortunate because when the weather was extreme, if you will, and I know you guys have different definitions of that, but for example, when the heat wave hit in mid-June and we had known that temperatures were in the 90s from some prior research that had been done, some of the observations we did had, but when we were able to determine, you're looking at heat indices that reach upwards of 117, 118, that's just strikes you, so oh my God, what are these guys having to deal with here? And so they wrote about it in mass when you had that kind of impact affecting them. And it just so happened, this happened when they're marching 15, 20, 25 miles a day. And it's an experience they never forgot. So, they wrote about it in their diaries, they wrote letters home. Even when they wrote years later about it, this is what stood out in their mind. So we had volumes of accounts and that John had at his disposal. You might have on June 17th, for instance, 40 or 50 accounts written by these guys easily, probably more, that he could bounce off the data he had and make sense of all this.
And that right there, marching, just let that sink in for a minute. Marching 15, 20, 25 miles. And sometimes some of the generals, would get them to pull off even more amazing things than that, and
Yep.
surprise, their opponent, covering these ridiculous distances. And sometimes they would get there and they'd be too tired to fight. I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, well, that's one of the key stories. And I think everybody's asked us, okay, this is great. We've never had a day-by-day accounting of the weather during the campaign. We have it, and we have more information than anyone's ever had. But how about your interpretation of the battle? Could it have made a difference? How might it have made a difference? And was it, William, are you in Alabama? I know one of y'all chatting here, somebody's down in Alabama. I mean, there's no greater
a couple
example.
of us are in Alabama.
Okay. So you got the 15th Alabama Infantry, Alabama Brigade on the Union Army left flank on the afternoon of July 2nd, but they don't get there till about 4 o'clock. What were they doing all day? Well, their day started about 3 in the morning when they got orders. They were out in the mountains about 10 miles west of Gettysburg, actually a little further than that. They had to get to Gettysburg, get there in a hurry. So 15, 20 miles later, they arrive in Gettysburg around noon, tongues hanging out. They hadn't had any hydration. They haven't had any rest. It's been a tough forced march. And you get a few minutes break and find out you got to fall into march into position on the battlefield where they need you. And that turns out to be on the right flank of the Confederate Army, left flank of the Union Army, and it's where the action is going to begin that afternoon. So by the time they get there, it's 28 miles, one day. They haven't fired the first bullet. They send guys out to get water for all their canteens. They send a handful of guys out with all the Those guys don't get back. Most of them captured. You're going into battle like this. And you would never put these guys at the tip of the spear, but this is Evander Law's Alabama Brigade. And sure enough, when they attack, they run into sharpshooters. They get drawn up Big Round Top, the highest piece of ground on the battlefield. And when they get to the top of the hill, they're so exhausted, their regimental commander, William Calvin Oates, will say, boys, we're taking a break. They took about a 10-minute break, Bill. In that 10 minutes, previously unoccupied Little Round Top, the key position on the left flank of the Union Army that day, will be occupied. And that's the 20th Maine Infantry and some of their fellow members of Strong Vincent.
Chamberlain.
Isn't that something? Did weather make a difference? I think so.
Oh my goodness. I'd never put that connection together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Joshua Chamberlain is a legend now that was made in that situation.
Deservedly so. And fortunately for them, they had a hard march the day prior, no doubt about it. But that day they didn't have to march 28 miles to get to that spot. You know, they marched across the back of the Union Army fishhook position, a mile or so, and they're there waiting. You know, and they earned their name and fame that day, and Chamberlain will get the Medal of Honor, like I said, deservedly so. But those boys from Alabama take a backseat to no one for what they accomplished that day and what they nearly accomplished in terms of taking that position despite everything they had been through.
Jeff, put everything in perspective, because not everybody, wants to take a pop quiz on the Civil War tomorrow, like like you and I. 1861, you had the Battle of Manassas. There's a route there, and the southern side wins and sends the Union soldiers back to Washington, D.C. Just put things in perspective real quickly, how we get to 1863, because by July 1863, this is really kind of the turning point of the war.
Yeah, for
A
most people,
lot of things are happening that are turning the tide in favor of the Union at that point.
They are, and some will argue that 62 Antietam might have been the true turning point. But for Lee, by this point of the war, Bill, he is definitely in full realization the South cannot win a war of attrition. They've been fighting for 2 years. They win battles, but it's one step forward and 2 steps back. You're losing manpower, you're losing war-making material the whole time. So what can you do to change things? His plan is to move north. Let's change the theater of action, give relief to Virginia. Let's threaten the major northern city somewhere, somehow. And let's draw that Union Army into ground of our choosing once and for all and defeat it. Figuring that if they can win a battle on northern soil, this war just might not seem like such a good idea to the northern populace at this point. Now, we know today didn't turn out that way. But you got to put yourself in his shoes and look at what the situation was in 63. And it was dire, and it was getting worse. And if you stop that battle on July 2nd, just prior to the Alabamans' attack, you might consider that he's got quite an opportunity. And again, we know how things turned out, but you got to view it from the point of view of what he knew, when he knew it. And he suffers during the battle from lack of good intelligence. His chief source of that is Jeb Stuart. And he's ridden around the Union Army to disrupt the rear and cut off communications. But by doing so, he leaves Lee blindfolded basically in enemy territory. So I don't think Lee ever quite understands the strength of the Union position, the Union Army, etc. And that's going to cost him ultimately with the decision he makes on day 3 with Pickett's charge, Longstreet's assault, whatever you want to call it. But this is a point in the war, bottom line, you've got to change things or it's over. And Lee knows this.
And I'm not paying good attention to the chat over here. So if any of my compatriots want to jump in at any point, please make sure that so I'm going to stop here for a second and make sure I catch up. I've gotten a little too enamored with my subject here. So
Happens.
anybody else want to ask or say anything? James A., I'm sure you had something really important to say along the way here.
And I assume these were the old wool uniforms too, right?
Yeah, when we address that in the book, because that's the presumption, and it's by and large good, but the uniforms change over the course of the war in terms of
Oh,
how they're made and different things, and the Southerners are wearing by this time of the war largely what we call jean cloth. It's a mixture of wool and cotton, so it's going to be a little better in the summer for them than it is in the winter. Just the opposite for the Union. But this heat is significant enough that I think that's not going to be the largest factor, certainly, but it comes into play. And we just try to clarify that. We do a little sidebar on that in the book to explain that a little better. But
very
you
cool.
got to
Thank
remember, they're all wearing drawers too, as they referred to that. So they're wearing long underwear under these uniforms. And we did talk to a lot of people about how this might impact things. And one of the prevailing thoughts from a gentleman that's in the medical profession was conveyed to us is that when you're in the sun to control your core temperature, you're better off having some clothing on as opposed to when you're in the shade. So it kind of works both ways there a little bit. And so you can argue both points, but the bottom line is when we found out that on the third day of the battle, Professor Jacobs, the Smithsonian observer, told us at 2 p.m. it's 87 degrees. And like John said, he didn't have wet bulb, but Harrisburg did, 2 observers in Harrisburg. So we were able to extrapolate and find out that that heat index on day 3 at the time of the charge, which was about 4 p.m., you're looking at anywhere between 98 and 105. And we always remind our readers, as they tell you at NOAA, don't forget that's a shade temperature heat index. So what's it feel like in the sun? Tack on another 10 to 15, depending on circumstance. You know, how much you have in the way of cloud cover, what were the winds, what time of year is it, you know, close to the summer solstice. And we feel pretty, and John can speak to this better than me, but pretty confident that you can tack on a significant amount more to that. So it's about as bad as it could get for those guys in July of '63 at Gettysburg.
Is there just kind of a quick follow up to that? Is there a temperature difference between the navy blue and the gray when you're in the sun in those uniforms?
We believe, in talking to enough different people, that definitely you're going to feel it more in the blue than you are going to feel it in the gray. Yeah.
And as they refer to it in Shelby Foote, butternut.
Butternut. Well, they wore that too. Yeah. They got the gray and the butternut. And the butternut, you'll see it a couple different ways, Bill. Sometimes it's from the gray wearing out, and sometimes it's from the walnut husk they use to create the dye for it. So there's 2 kinds of butternut. And yeah, there's a little bit. But old Shelby Foote. Nobody had a draw like him, did they? When they did that Ken Burns series? Miles old hair on 1, 2. Yeah, I remember that.
What a spectacular series that was. It really made that come alive with Shelby Foote, just his stories. But talk about Michael Jacobs, John, for a minute, because he had to be just kind of a weather nerd like us, I think, to some degree.
Yeah, Jacobs was actually on the network of the Pennsylvania Weather Observer set up by James Espy at the Franklin Institute starting in the 1830s. So he was the Adams County, Pennsylvania Weather Observer. And when Espy headed to DC and paired up with the Smithsonian, Jacobs just kind of came along as part of the Smithsonian Meteorological Project. He was a professor at Pennsylvania College, which is now known as Gettysburg College. Loved doing anything in the outdoors. Developed a curriculum that was centered around the weather, and religiously, diligently observed the weather 3 times a day, right through the battle, which is pretty extraordinary when you consider he lived on Middle Street in downtown Gettysburg. And as Jeff will tell you, there were there were troops, often Confederate troops, literally on his doorstep. Yet he diligently took 3 observations a day right through the battle.
John Gordon would have been taking them every hour, I think, if he had been there. So, John Gordon, you've been very patient, and I want to hear your comment on Vicksburg, and then you brought up something really, really important here.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. There's a real, you guys, this is amazing. Everyone should buy this book. Okay. The American Battlefield Trust website, it's got a big comparison on the whole Civil War weather. I can send you the link anyway. But one thing I learned from the state climatologist of Mississippi when I worked there was about the 1862 drought that decimated the South. They talked about how it destroyed crops across the whole Confederacy. And it was cascading events that occurred across the whole South because of the big drought. Do you guys have any comments about the drought?
John, you were.
No, you studied that at all?
I have not.
I think Ken No covers it.
Ken No, who wrote the Howling Storm, a book that came out a couple years ago, does talk about that drought in a bigger context and tries to link it to. I don't remember if an El Nino or a La Nina was in progress at that time, but we don't venture beyond the Gettysburg campaign in our book. Now, I am intrigued to perhaps use the NOAA reanalysis system to see what kind of anomalies it might produce during the time of this drought. I think that would be fascinating. I mean, I've already looked at another Civil War related weather event, the so-called Mud March in January of 1863. And the NOAA reanalysis system does a really nice job of I believe, approximating the synoptic conditions that would have produced that big rainstorm in Virginia that led to that event. But no, we did not cover anything outside of the Gettysburg campaign.
Secondly, how hot was it? The rumors about Vicksburg. How hot was it during the battle?
I didn't quite catch it. You broke up a little bit. You want to know how hot was it during Gettysburg?
How hot was it in Vicksburg? Yeah, in Vicksburg.
In Vicksburg. That's good. I mean, we didn't study Vicksburg as part of what we were looking at here. I'm trying to think what weather observers might have been close enough to give you something on that. Certainly, there's going to be soldiers' accounts just like we had. And
well, you have to remember too, Vicksburg was a siege.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Vicksburg lasted for months and months and months.
Oh, yeah.
And I bet Ludlam probably covered it, John. I'll have to grab my Ludlam books in here, and we'll have to ask that question because I think that's a really good question.
Your best chance
to
get. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You probably had every kind of weather known to man during that siege, John Gordon, I would imagine.
When you got somewhere located, like I was just in Franklin, Tennessee a couple weeks ago. And when John Bell Hood tried to do what he tried to do out there, it's November, December time frame. And there's a weather observer not far from where the action took place. So we were fortunate there. You get into border state regions, you got a better chance of finding some observers that were still observing. You get in the heart of Dixie, it's a little tougher. So to get that granularity might be tough, but there may be sources and people may have looked at it. Like you said, certainly Ludlam's worth a try, and there may be some modern looks. And I don't know I didn't look at No's work there. He's got great end notes on what sources he used, and there may be something. But I think what the value of what John and I did beyond Gettysburg is we've given people a model of what they can now look at, whether it's summer or winter. You want to take a look at it, you've got those 3 things. You better come up with some accounts. You better be using that reconstruction program, and then try to find some observations from someone reliable.
John, talk about the heat wave between June 10th and the 18th and why that was important in the context of the campaign.
Yeah, it was certainly well known qualitatively before our work. It was really a 4-day heat wave, the 15th through the 18th. It was the heat wave on the 18th was, as best I can tell, broken by a cold front, which was accompanied by thunderstorms with some hail. The observations from the Naval Observatory in D.C., which I think are very applicable in this situation because the troops weren't that far from D.C. at the time. Max temperatures were 93 or higher 4 consecutive days. The worst day of the heat wave based on heat index would have been the 17th. Dew points in DC approached 80. Historically, I looked at modern observations from both Dulles and Reagan just to kind of get a sense for how unusual a heat wave, a heat index above 110 would be in June in that part of the world. And to be honest, I couldn't find any modern day comparisons with heat indices as high as we think they got. So this was an historic heat wave with humidity in the middle of June during a time when the Union Army was in catch-up mode because the Confederates were farther north, closer to Maryland and Pennsylvania. But the soldiers told us qualitatively. In fact, Jeff and I would have discussions. Well, which quotes should we use? Is it, and there are just too many. There's just too many quotes to choose from in these diaries, in these letters home. And I really want to give Jeff credit here. Jeff compiled a 450-page Word document filled with nothing but quotes from soldiers and citizen observers that had something to do with the weather during that 42-day period. That's where we started, with these qualitative descriptions, no numbers, qualitative descriptions. Now, there were a few numbers when they crossed the Potomac. They would say maybe 3 feet deep, et cetera, but you get my drift. None of these guys had thermometers. And so I think Jeff said it earlier, an extreme like that came across loud and clear in both the observations and the soldier reports.
All right, Kim, you got a question that's pertinent right here, so hit it.
Yeah. So as you were going through and looking at the different soldier reports, it strikes me that you had people from very different source regions, right, of the country. So people in the South, while it's swampy, they might have been more acclimated to that. And I don't know if, do you know much about their attire? Was it a little bit lighter than Northern attire, or was it similar? Were they reporting having, heat distress at similar, like in similar ways to people who were from the North, or were people in the North having a harder time with it? Because there's also that piece of it too, the way you're acclimated coming into the battle. If you're used to those conditions, or at least more used to it, maybe you have a bit of a leg up. What did your analysis show?
Well, I'll let Jeff answer the bulk of this, but I will simply say that we found that generally speaking, when it came to the weather, all soldiers were equal opportunity complainers.
And that's our line, and that's the truth. And the other thing is, unfortunately, they're equal opportunity sufferers. And I'll give you an example. There's a source document called The Medical and Surgical History of the United States Civil War, War of the Rebellion. And the Union Army that's in the Gettysburg campaign had about 20% of the overall men in every Union Army throughout the nation. But in the month of June 1863, they suffered 60% of all reported cases of sunstroke. So think about that. 20% of the men, 60% of the cases. What's going on? That heat wave is what's going on in the month of June. And as far as the acclimation, that's something we delved into as much as non-experts in the field could. We did talk to a lot of folks, studied a lot of documents. The Army has a document that's currently in use. And if you read that, efforts can be made, certainly, to acclimate people better to such circumstances. Works, in the desert. But as far as the soldiers in the Civil War, the best acclimation was going to come from having been in the Army, irrespective of where you're from, and been through these types of marches in this type of heat. And certainly we had cases. There was one soldier, and I can't remember whether he was Georgia or Alabama, but he said this is the worst heat he had ever experienced in his entire life. So, again, he's going through the marches. He's not getting hydration. He's not getting rest. In the South, non-wartime, you're suffering through the heat, but you're not going through these experiences. And in the North, you'd have soldiers talk about the same thing, but not much different from what you're hearing from the Southern soldiers. So a lot of parallels there.
And let me add to that. We actually computed the wet bulb globe temperature a few times. And of course, one advantage of the wet bulb globe is it takes into account heat, humidity, sunshine, and wind. But it also comes, because it's been used in the military for so long, it comes with guidelines that if the wet bulb globe temperature gets to this level, you need this much water per hour and you need this much rest per hour. And in most cases, I think Jeff will agree, the soldiers aren't getting that amount of water and that amount of rest.
Not even close. You're right. Exactly, John.
Were there any other practices that were in place to try to help the soldiers at that time that were either detrimental or were beneficial that we know now that you know about,
Yeah.
Jeff? Hydration or salt or
I'm
anything
trying to
that.
remember. In the medical surgical, there were some case studies in there. And I think in a number of instances, they were realizing that, they need to rest, needs to be some hydration, but also they're doing things like this guy needs a little alcoholic beverage, so what's that going to do
No.
to you? So
Yeah.
there's a few treatments that weren't good.
Yeah, it does seem like, Jeff, now that you mention it, whenever, if you look at the sum total of what might have been mentioned, I don't remember much in the way of anything being done to help other than a little bit of alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they would mention.
Mm.
Not that it helped, but you get my drift here that.
Yeah.
So John, was there any element of weather forecasting at all? Even from just being able to read the signs of the sky with any of the leadership at all?
It certainly didn't seem like it. I mean, I left the project with the overriding impression that what these folks wouldn't have given for at least a decent 3-day forecast. But in fact, there's one quote we include in the book. I can't remember who said it, but it was the obvious use of persistence forecasting. Well, the weather's been good for a couple days. I think it shall remain good for a few more. And so no, I mean, there was literally no sense on either side that we got of anyone having any real understanding of the weather, of weather forecasting.
That's just always been the thing to me, it seems like to me, there were some signs you would occasionally hear, in the writings of Shelby Foote, coming obviously from the diaries and things that would make oh, here's what's coming and you should already know this. Oh, if you only knew, but take us through the retreat now. The battle's over, Jeff, and Lee's retreating, and a flood plays into this very prominently. So take us into that and what happened there. Jeff, take it away. Talk about that for a minute.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when the Confederates begin their retreat on the afternoon, early evening of July 4th, the rain starts in earnest, and they make their way out towards the mountains, and they use two different ways to get through the mountain passes, two different passes to get over to the valley, the Cumberland Valley, which is the northern extension of the Shenandoah Valley, and their goal was to get down to Williamsport, Maryland, on the Potomac and cross back into Virginia. And Lee had left a pontoon bridge there on the way north, no longer available to him. Unbeknownst to them, Union cavalry coming up from Harper's Ferry had destroyed quite a bit of it. And worse yet, these heavy rains have set in so much that the Potomac River, which is normally fordable at about 2-3 feet, is ranging somewhere upwards of 15 feet, and it'll get upwards of 20 before it's done. And by definition of what NOAA says today, that's not a true flood in Williamsport, but I'll tell you what, it's enough to keep you from crossing it, and it did leave for over a week. So he's with his back against the wall there, and slowly, some would say, but certainly, Meade is going to catch up with the Union Army commander, and things look a little grim there. But the rainfall had been a little uncertain in terms. We only had Jacobs records. There was an observer in Leitersburg, Maryland, which is close to Hagerstown, which is close to Williamsport, Maryland. He did not observe at that time. Unfortunately, at least the records are not extant. And so we didn't know. So I had to turn to John. And this is where John and I kept having fun. I guess it was fun. I kept badgering John. John, there's got to be a way to figure this out. Can we look at instances where the weather had been similar, the river is rising, and where we do know what the rainfall was? So that goes into John's avenue here. So let him tell you about that.
Certainly, we have to recognize it's July, and you know what July is like in the mid-Atlantic, scattered thunderstorms. So, I mean, all I asked was, can we find a couple times in modern day proxies where the river at Williamsport got to 15 feet or more, and simply ask the question, how much rain did it take in that part of the Potomac Basin to produce water levels that were of the same as what Lee faced back in July of 1863. So we found 3 modern day proxies using NOAA data, of course, came to the conclusion that 3 to 4 inches of rain in the drainage basin of that part of the Potomac, upriver of Williamsport, Maryland, would be enough to produce the water levels that Lee faced. And so we postulated that rainfall amounts might have been in that range between July 4th and 8th of 1863. No one had been able to come up with a number. And then we got lucky. We got some pictures taken from Williamsport, Maryland, from some of Jeff's colleagues who live there, of what the river looked like when it got above 15 feet during one of those recent times. So we threw those in the book and postulated that, maybe this is sort of kind of what it looked like. We know the river has changed over the course of 160 years, and there's a new dam. So, we'll never know for certain. And the antecedent conditions may have been different during the proxies as opposed to what happened in July of 1863. But that was a fun little side project. And once again, based on data from modern day observers.
And John, turns out kind of unusual for that time of the month to have that, right?
Right. It turns out that if you look at the last 30 years worth of data from Williamsport, Maryland, courtesy of the Mid-Atlantic River Forecast Center, the water levels in Williamsport, Maryland have not risen above 15 feet in the last 30 years during the month of July. So we couldn't even find any July proxies. So we had to use proxies from April, May, and June. So that was sort of our addition to the known literature about the retreat.
So what happened there, Jeff, to Lee? Did Lee eventually, obviously he escaped. Was it just Meade's malfeasance that allowed him to escape?
Yeah, and we're still arguing that. They started, and Lincoln wasn't happy with Meade. Felt like he should have had him in the palm of his hand, Lee, and should have closed that hand. But there are those that will argue that he was smart in waiting, and Lee was inviting attack, had plenty of trenches dug, in essence, to anticipate such an attack, and he would have loved to return the favor of what he suffered at Gettysburg. So bottom line is, it slows up in terms of rain just enough for that river to subside. They do an amazing job repairing the pontoon bridge, and they get across on the night of July 13th and the morning of the 14th. Ironically, that's about the time Meade had finally decided to close in on Lee, and he's too late. And so the war is going to drag on another couple of years, unfortunately, because not unfortunate that Lee got away, but just that many more men are going to die before it's over.
Troy Kimmel, I wish I'd had Jeff as one of my history professors, I think.
Hey,
I
you know
agree.
what? WeatherBrains needs to take a field trip. Come on up. I had the honor of taking Greg Forbes on the field not long ago, and Dr. Neese. Never thought I'd be that fortunate, but love to have y'all come up.
Troy and I'll be on front seat of the bus.
Yeah, there you go.
No bus. We're doing the 15th Alabama. It's a long walk that day, but you'll get there.
We'll go to Little Round Top right with you. Now, so Jeff and John, then you comment. What were some of the cool sort of historical weather words you ran into that maybe we don't use today that people used back in the 19th century?
Oh, that's a good question.
Any that stick out, like my grandmother would have used or something like that?
I think you got me stumped there, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Johnny Carson, I stumped the band, Troy Kimmel.
Yeah.
I need to go back through that 450-page Word document.
We need a
I know
Karnak moment, don't we? Got the book here.
the-
Let me put it to my head.
Yeah.
I
There's
saw
no
those yellow
CB, there's
sticky
no
notes.
CB Southwest or anything. I mean, the CB
CB
distance Southwest. So
I saw those yellow sticky notes on there, Jeff.
Oh yeah, yeah. Still cut back
I would
to it.
I would kill just for 5 minutes with that 450-page Word document. I can tell you that right now. All right. Well, since I stumped the band with that question, I'll ask you this one. I'll ask both of you this one. Which campaign you think needs a weather autopsy next from the Civil War?
It's good. It's good too. John, any thoughts?
You're the
Maybe
Civil
Chattanooga.
War
Yeah, I would.
historian. I mean,
I
you
think
turn-
just for definition purposes, things like Antietam, summer campaigns, Second Manassas. You're leading into Second Manassas, you got Cedar Mountain, and that's one of the other periods of really extreme heat during the Civil War. Wrote about that in Civil War Times a couple years ago. So certainly that time frame. But I would think also the opposite end of the coin. Let's take a look at a couple of the winters, and John touched on Burnside's Mud March, and there's much to be learned about there, I think, in some of these things. And I'm enamored with Franklin since I was down there, and talking to Eric Jacobson down there, and he's the man, and there's things to be expanded upon there as well.
There's a lot of history there in northern Mississippi too, around Corinth.
I was going to say Shiloh and the Battle of Corinth. We could have done that and got James to fly us all in there.
There you go.
So,
What month did Shiloh happen? Was it in April?
Shiloh's in that's April, early April. Wow. I think 7th, 8th, something
the
like
Peach
that.
Orchard.
Yeah, they got their own. That's right. We got one.
Is the quote I always tell people true? Sherman and Grant says, he says, or Sherman says to him, "Devil of a day, Grant," and he says, "Yeah, but we'll lick them tomorrow."
Yeah,
is that really a true quote?
Yeah, I can't imagine it's not.
All right. Well, and then John, I'll ask you one last thing, then I'll let all my other colleagues here join in before James asks all the really hard questions. Your forewords and afterwards in the book are really important here. Talk about those, what they meant to you for a minute.
Well, for me to have Greg Forbes agree to write the afterword, Greg has relatives who fought in the Civil War, and has asked for years to come up and get a tour of the battlefield and to connect him with Jeff. And Greg came up with his cousin and visited on July 5th of this year. And it was just fabulous to have him at our presentation that we gave at the military museum there, the military park visitor headquarters. Jeff's connections are responsible for getting Carol Reardon to write our foreword, so I'll let him handle that.
Yeah, God bless Carol. She's been a staunch supporter from the word go, and she's sort of the dean, or certainly one of the deans of Gettysburg historians, voluminous writings, professor extraordinaire, reinvented herself more than once after retirement, and she's back teaching again. But spent many years at Penn State, so I thought it was a perfect thing to dovetail for our research and our efforts to turn to Carol and ask her to take a look at our work and see if she would agree to write our forward. She honored us by doing so. So very proud of that, but very gracious as well.
I want to thank you both for being on the show, and I am going to buy your book. Being the historian, well, amateur one with Tornado Talk, and I'm dedicating my life now to doing tornado history. It's so important to learn history. And when I was in in Alabama this weekend, I talked to a couple of folks that said, a lot of the young people they don't know what happened here. They don't know that their town was hit with an F5 and the importance of remembering. And I wanted to hear from both of you why history is important, especially weather history, whether it's, this type of thing or tornado history, hurricanes, the importance of history and why we should continue to remember. And I really would like to hear from both of you.
John?
Well, in this case, the weather clearly impacted the behaviors and potentially, in some cases, the outcomes of battles. And although the participants at that time didn't appreciate or have the kind of understanding that we do modern day of the future, certainly the lessons learned from putting human beings in the presence of Mother Nature without much in the way of cover, even though it wasn't quantifiable at that time, it's quantifiable now. And you see so many instances in modern times when weather impacts an event, not necessarily in wartime, but something as recent as the Challenger disaster was clearly weather related. And so I think it simply reminds us of the role that weather can play. And even if you get the forecast right, these days, bad things can still happen.
Absolutely. I'll just add to that use a quote sometimes on tours about the fact that the war can make bad men worse and good men better. And I think weather circumstances can do the same. We see it every time there's a hurricane, tornado, there's bad and good coming out of people. And thank goodness the good overwhelms the bad ultimately and gives you hope. And I think that you see that in both disciplines, whether it's warfare or history, and hope is what we need.
I love that. I think another aspect of the history equation that to me is so interesting, looking back on these events, is to put some color to the people that were involved. So you were studying written accounts from soldiers. We had tens of thousands, if not at Gettysburg, like 100,000 people, right, throughout the campaign. It was the scale of the people was massive. And while you did have some, several dozen accounts, it's not everybody, writing things down. What's interesting to me is, this is all taking place in the context of a population that it's not completely literate. Not everybody had the opportunity to learn how to write down their experiences that way. The people who were taught and who were writing, they could have been pulled into the military ranks from all kinds of professions, being doctors, being, legal minds, scholars of different kinds, teachers. Did you learn, as you were pulling those quotes out from their lived experiences, were you learning about who those people were, who were doing the reporting? What were some of the different backgrounds of the people that you were learning from and corroborating experiences from?
Yeah, great question. And hello to the pup back there. I'm a dog lover. I used to train Labradors.
I'm so sorry. That is the dog that is very much in trouble right now. So he's
Great escape,
maybe. Okay.
Yeah, the escapee. He's very much in the literal doghouse.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. The walks of life that send soldiers into the Civil War is A to Z, and you do learn from them. And what really surprised me is if I just had to put a number on it, and maybe it's because the guys who were illiterate could not write what they wanted to write. But almost, I'd say 60, 70% of these accounts are so well written that I would say you challenge the large percentage of the populace today to write that well. You know, the education lent itself to that at that time. And so there were doctors, plenty of doctors. There were lawyers. A lot of times, lawyers were the guys that did get to go wear that general's uniform right away. And sometimes that was good, and sometimes it wasn't. But you got all walks of life sending soldiers into the United States Civil War. I use a quote often, and I tip my hat to the historian that first published on this, Tom Desjardins. At Gettysburg, we got 163,000 troops. One out of every 200 people alive in the United States at that time in our nation's history is in the Battle of Gettysburg. So I ask the mathematicians in the crowd when I'm giving tours, what would that mean today? How big would this battle have to be today? And if we had an equivalent battle relative to our population, we'd need 1.5 million people. And at Gettysburg, there were 51,000 casualties in 3 days. How many casualties would you need today? You'd need 500,000 in 3 days. That's killed, wounded, missing in action. How many would be killed? We'd estimate today we'd need 100,000 in 3 days. So that's the magnitude of the Battle of Gettysburg, and I think that's why we can't get away from it. And I keep telling people, you know, go pick up Jungle Book. And they say, why? And I say, because I want you to know about Rudyard Kipling and what he said. And we mention this in the book. If history were taught in the form of stories, we would never forget it. And that's what we do as guides. We take those stories. We don't have to make it up. It's true, good, bad, and ugly. But we want to leave you with memories when you come to Gettysburg that will help you remember the magnitude. The numbers don't always get it, but those stories will help reinforce that fact.
Well, if you're ever in southern Pennsylvania, you've got to go and do this experience. It is seminal to United States history. And you're not very far from Antietam, which to me is one of the most beautiful battlefields.
It is.
If a battlefield can be beautiful, it is a pastoral setting. The bridge, Burnside's bridge, is still there. It looks just like it did in Matthew Brady's pictures. If the Dunker Church hadn't been hit by a windstorm, had to be rebuilt, it would still look just like it did. But I can't wait to come back and make sure you're my tour guide, Jeff, when we do this. But I know this is not in the book and it's not related, but talk about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, because he was really mistreated over that. And I still resent it a little bit because they didn't even want him there.
No.
He was kind of an afterthought. He delivered the most spectacular speech. I learned it in the 3rd grade. I can still recite it today. A lot of American kids, you know, had to learn it. I don't think they still do, but should have to.
Should.
Yeah. And you know, there was one journalist who thought he did a good job. All the other ones thought he did a terrible job.
Yeah.
And talk about that for a minute, Jeff. Put it all in perspective, how important that speech was.
Sure. Well, Lincoln was amazingly insightful, you know, and he was a student of history himself, and he knew that this was an experiment, this government of ours. And he had looked at different writers and orators and guys like Webster and even Edward Everett, who was the keynote speaker, if you will, right? And they planned the entire event that fall around his availability. And he comes and speaks for 2 hours. And by the way, spent a little time with Jacobs learning about the battle, because Jacobs wrote the first history of the battle, in essence. Anyway, he spoke for 2 hours and Lincoln speaks for 2 minutes. And it's his words we remember. And to me, my favorite lines: "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here." And the irony is that in that is that we've remembered Lincoln's words, but people have forgotten. And Bill, you urging them to come is just what we need to find out what happened there so they can remember it, so we don't make some of these mistakes over and over again that history's been trying to teach us. So I think Lincoln had the feel for that. He was very perceptive and he felt this deeply. And that speech is timeless and should be reread and retaught in our schools every year, every year. And I'm like you, I don't think it's as much as it had been. We need to revisit that.
How long did it take for that to become widespread, thought of as great, from just maybe a journalist here and there to this is now in the lexicon of great speeches?
That's a good question. And there are books expressly on the subject. And I have to tell you, and it's not I'm not anywhere near anything kind of, and I wouldn't even use the word scholar, Lincoln expert. But there are books about that. My feel for it, to be honest with you, is that it's probably turn of the century before that begins, like a generation or two later before that really becomes, felt like that's the
Wow.
speech that we all believe it is. I think some of it starts appreciation wise when you begin to get into things like the 50th anniversary of the battle in 1913. And there are efforts to mend those wounds among those that are left. And people are starting to have that appreciation. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the author's name that has a book on the speech itself, Wills, I think. But yeah.
He went back to Washington D.C. on the train with a mild case of smallpox.
Yeah, that's right. Family was fighting it. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, one of the great trees that was there on his route up from the town square to the cemetery. And the folks that are listening don't know he's there for the dedication of our nation's first national cemetery.
Make me an image of a Civil War.
It cut over to you. So there's a
What?
huge sycamore
What?
tree there. Still there from the battle. There's a wonderful museum in town, Heritage Center. Used to be the Wax Museum. They've got a big piece of the tree that there were two huge sycamores in the pictures when Lincoln's coming up Baltimore Street. And you can see that there.
It's a beautiful town and a beautiful place, and I loved every minute of going there. I can't wait to come back. And Jeff, if there's any way we can get together when I'm there, I hope that's right. And I'm coming to see you, Dr. Neese, when we come back to Pennsylvania.
I'll meet you in Gettysburg.
There you go.
We will definitely get together. So, James, unless any of the other panelists have anything, I think we've kept our guests long enough tonight.
So now is it Gettysburg or Gettysburg? You'll have me so confused now.
Gettysburg now, James. We have to change how we say
one of those in Rome, right? Do as the Romans do, and so you go to Stanton, Virginia. Don't call it Staunton.
Oh, I learned that last fall when I went to ride the train. It is not Staunton. It is Stanton.
No. And if you go over to area in Pennsylvania, not far from Gettysburg or Gettysburg,
Lancaster.
Yes, don't say Lancaster.
We learned that. We learned that from one of our old panelists, real quick, who saved me coming to Penn State that day because we were there during the Harrisburg flooding. And he sent me a way that seemed out of the way to get to State College, but it saved us that morning coming to the football game, John. We might have still been driving.
Yeah, I didn't remember that there was flooding that day. Are we talking about our mutual friend John?
Oh yes.
Okay.
And
good.
He said that we had dinner that night before, and he said, "Bill, don't go the way the GPS is going to try to take you because you're going to run into trouble. Go this way." And we left out at 5 o'clock in the morning because I wanted pancakes at what's the famous pancake place in State College?
The Waffle Shop.
Yeah, I had to be there in front of the line. I was not gonna miss that experience. So I made my entourage get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and leave for a state college. And I wouldn't trade any of that experience for that whole day.
Oh, you come back.
I can't wait. We'll definitely do it. I'm gonna bring James Spann with me.
Please do.
Well, okay. We'll see if we can prime you out of this for a little bit. When are you guys going to tackle another war? How about Korea, World War II? Come on. What's next?
Boy, I
I
tell
need
you
a
what.
I need a break.
I'm still after him. We're working on one more thing. Well, we got the weather for the Gettysburg Address. No one's ever had that in terms of the source document. And we're looking at something else too up our sleeve. But yeah, he's still got life up there. He's working, and
I'm in the middle of fall.
tired.
I'm in the middle of fall semester here. That's all I got to say.
Doing a TV show.
Is there anything you can do for our new weather network, John? Maybe we can do some sort of live remote together or something. We'd love to have you.
I would love that. Let's talk about that. We still have a 15-minute weather magazine show that Penn State creates called Weather World, that we are training the future generations of television meteorologists. And you saw the show, I believe, Bill, when you came up.
Yeah, we'd love to talk. So let's you and I get on the phone here in the next week or so. Have a conversation.
I'm going back to school. I want to be a TV meteorologist in my next life. So
it's never too late, Jeff.
Study under John.
It might not be a TV meteorologist anymore. It might be some sort of digital meteorologist.
You're going to be a streamer.
Yep.
Streamer, YouTuber. TikTok
John's on his
dancer.
game
Yeah.
for your tornado people, because the Fujita, I threw something at him the other day. I'm like, John, do you know this? Because I'm looking into history and weather, and I brought up Fujita, and John was all over it. What, 20 years ago, he had a little program about Fujita. May have never survived if the atomic bomb, the second one, had landed where it was supposed to.
Right.
Yeah, don't get Dr. Forbes started on Fujita.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Greg's one of Fujita's students.
Yeah, we had the filmmaker who did the American Experience on Fujita. It was amazing.
Yeah, sure was. I mean, Greg did his PhD, I believe, on the 74 super outbreak.
Yeah, Jen's living this day in, day out with her work.
Yeah.
God bless y'all.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, we appreciate
Thank you for reaching out, John. I'm glad we made the connection.
Me too. Appreciate it.
All right. So if you guys are welcome to stay. You don't have to run. I mean, if you can stay for a few minutes, fine. Because we have to do picks of the week. And you two guys, I know, will have a good pick of the week. Anything related to weather, so just be thinking about it.
Okay.
But what we got to do right now, we have to pause, and we're going to go to Jen. And by the way, we don't have Tony this week, so we're going to have Jen doing This Week in Tornado History. We will do an email segment this week. We'll have picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
This week in tornado history. On Saturday morning, October 3rd, 1992, severe storms developed over the Tampa Bay, Florida area. 3 tornadoes occurred. The strongest, rated F3, struck Pinellas Park. The National Weather Service survey showed the tornado started south of the Seaboard Coastline Railroad and quickly strengthened as it moved into dense neighborhoods. At the Park Royale Village Trailer Park, 87 mobile homes were destroyed and 63 more were heavily damaged. Outside the park, several single-family and brick homes were leveled. There were 3 fatalities. In Park Royale, 81-year-old Charles Chick McGrath was critically injured and later died from those injuries. Teresa Moore was killed when her home was lifted and thrown. Sembecca Schatz died outside her garage in the Beacon Run subdivision while her children sheltered safely inside. The tornado continued to the north, crossing busy residential streets and striking Pinellas Park High School. Portions of the roof were torn away, classroom wings damaged, and trees and light poles were toppled. About 40 students and 8 teachers were present that Saturday morning. None were hurt. Nearby businesses and an industrial park also sustained roof and wall failures. Read more about this event at tornadotalk.com.
Well, we haven't done it in a while, but it's time tonight to dig into the good old email inbox.
All righty. So a couple of emails. The first one is not weather related. We got this from Johnny, but WeatherBrains needs to start a campaign to get James Spann as the guest picker for College Game Day on Saturday, October 4th, live from T-Town. You got my vote, and Nick Saban would like it too. And I have seen this all over Facebook. And James, you said something too of how much you would love to do this.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm there and I predict the future for a living. That's what I do. And I understand predicting the future is hard. And I'll come in there with some analytics in a different set of eyeballs on these games. So I'm just saying, and listen, Reese Davis and I, we're like in the Hall of Fame together down here at the University of Alabama. Coach Saban, I'm his weather guy. I mean, we're like a family here. So I'm just saying, if they need a guest picker, I just will happen to be there, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm not holding my breath.
It'd be so cool, though. That would be great. So we're got a couple of emails from Jay Farlow, who is a loyal listener and has a couple of questions about Imelda. So I think we're going to go through that. And then, John Gordon, you have a topic you want to cover about Imelda as well. But from Jay Farlow, the first email he sent was actually a link to a Facebook post. This was several days before Imelda even had a name, that there was a TV met referring to the potential tropical cyclone 9 as Imelda. I did not click the link and listen to that, but I thought that was kind of interesting that should we be saying the name of it if it's not got a name yet? So that was interesting. And then the other question he brought up is, does the forecasted right turn of Imelda seem unusually abrupt to you? Is it normal for a tropical cyclone to make such a sharp turn? So, John, did you want to talk about that?
I think Elena, 1985.
So we got Elena. We got Sandy. We got Ginger, 71. Look at Ginger's track. So you have to look at initialization. All right. All you weather weenies who are on social media making absurd, foolish comments about models when you don't even have initialization is insane. Okay. You must have initialization. The hurricane hunters, number one thing they do is initialization. It's not sea level pressure. It's not geopotential heights. It's not the wind fields. It's where is the bloody thing? And if you don't know where it is, the models are garbage, absolute garbage. All right. So all you nuts out there who are talking about models that don't even know where something is outrageous. Secondly, you have to look at your synoptic system. You have to look at your whole pressure system. The European correctly found out, John Neese, where Sandy was going. All right. And Elena was not well forecast. 85, right, James? 85, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep. Mid 80s.
Labor Day. Yep. Labor Day 85.
That saved Tampa Bay's bacon. You did the loop in Tampa Bay. So you got to look at the mesoscale and the synoptic steering currents. It is not unusual. If you don't believe it's not unusual, look at Ginger, 1971. That was a bizarre track.
Just amazing that it's been forecast so well. This is incredible.
Okay.
Go back to Dorian.
What's disturbing to me while we're on a rant here, some of these mainstream media sites were telling the world that two hurricanes will combine into one mega hurricane and threaten the east coast of the United States. I mean, what nitwit? It doesn't take much to check off with somebody that understands how this works before they do this, but it just seems like truth doesn't matter. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If they botch stories I understand, what are they botching that I don't understand? So goodness gracious, these media outlets need to just talk to somebody, one of us. We'll Just we'll help you. We'll be glad to help you. But don't. Some of the garbage was It's worse than the TikTok cussers and dancers coming from mainstream media people.
Well, I mean,
anyway.
part of it is the fact the mainstream media is desperate at this point. They're losing their influence, and they'll go for anything for clicks at this point, which should scare the hell out of every one of us.
That's
It's just disturbing.
They're crying for attention. That is for sure.
Yep.
Sorry, I was sending a text to John Gordon because he was asking me how his audio was. I think we should just talk about it right in the open. You were still cutting out.
Your aliens have taken over.
Yeah, you were cutting out just a little bit, and it becomes when you're more animaid, your audio cuts out. So just slightly though, it sounded a little bit better. Not as alien-esque.
No, but John, your mic. Yeah, your mic is still not in use. We're still on the Bluetooth anomaly situation. So once we get that mic hooked up, it's great. The mic is great, but we just got to get it routed into the system here.
Yeah, there are little connection issues.
We'll send him our old soundboard, James.
Now, John, did you have another topic on?
Oh, I'm just James. I want that James is right. National news stories were talking about 2 hurricanes combining to create the biggest since, I don't know, Sandy or something. And it's outrageous. It's outrageous.
Agreed. So if you would like to hear another rant from John Gordon, please send your topics to email at WeatherBrains.com. Yeah, $5 rant, email at WeatherBrains.com, and we will make sure that happens.
We'll get him a new audio hookup.
That's right. Yeah, we're gonna have a GoFundMe for a new audio setup here.
Got 5 people helping.
John,
I'll click anything to make this better.
No, we.
Hey, John, did you hear that Aer Lingus sent a big rant about that hurricane?
Oh boy! Yeah. Don't get this poor man worked up, please. We need him.
Yes, we do.
All right. So Jen, are you done? Are we done with email? Or
we're done? Yeah,
he's done with us.
Yeah, it's a wrap. All right, so we'll kind of, and again, the 2 tropical systems are going to move away from the United States. Bermuda, poor old Bermuda, goodness, that you've got a tropical storm warning from Imelda, and then from Umberto, and then you've got Imelda that might go right over the island as a hurricane Wednesday night. So it's a rough ride for them, but for the United States, thankfully, they're moving away. So let's do picks of the week. This is where we're going to go around the horn, and everybody's going to share something that is weather related. This can be a data source, a website, social media post, anything remotely interesting related to weather. Can be a book, can be anything close to weather. So how easy is that? So let's go down to Troy and see if Troy has a pick of the week for us this week. What you got, Troy?
Mine's sort of a sermon of the week, and I want us to kind of step back, if you will, and look back at this, because, when we were all together a few weeks ago on about the 10th or 11th of September at the NWA meetings in Huntsville, it was that day that 2 25-year-old hunters were killed by lightning up in the Rio Grande National Forest up in Colorado. And what's interesting more about that, and seeing what the coroner put out about that, was that there were not really that many obvious burn marks. It was interesting. They finally came to the conclusion that these guys were out during a storm that was crossing that area and apparently were electrocuted. Maybe one of the coroners pointed out maybe from ground electricity as a result of a nearby strike. And then we go 13 days later, and this one's even more disturbing to some degree. On the 24th of September, 2 hunters in their 30s, they're in the Highlands area of Central Florida, kind of east of Sarasota, kind of south of Orlando. Folks, look at that real carefully. This is in the lightning capital of the United States. where lightning is more common. They were killed along with both of their hunting dogs in another lightning event. And with hunters like this who are soon to be outdoors people. I just can't recall seeing something that comes 2 weeks apart essentially like this. And I think we've got to sit back and look at this is important stuff as far as safety rules are concerned with lightning, and really unfortunate situation earlier this month. And I just wanted to kind of pay attention to that. And the two links that I put online are the two stories, and that's my pick of the week.
Yeah, for some reason, we've lost our respect for lightning as a society. There was one of these sports YouTube superstar guys that was going on this rant about how lightning delays are ridiculous and they need to be stopped, and you just play through it. And this guy's got millions and millions of followers, and it's just we've totally lost our respect for lightning.
Yeah.
And I'm just terrified of it. I'm afraid of one thing when it comes to weather, and that's it. So we'll get those links up on weatherbrains.com. Let's go to James Adelot, since he's got to do the 9 o'clock news. James, what's on your mind? What you got?
This is going to be kind of strange, but I went a little goofy with today's picture of the week, and that is the funnel cake stand at the Tulsa State Fair. I wondered why all the chasers were running down there.
Cool.
But it said there were giant funnels, so they all came. They all came running.
And for those watching, we have the photo up right now, and I'm just fascinated by the different types of funnel cakes we have here. This looks good.
Hey, we do golden brown and delicious in multiple flavors here at the Tulsa State Fair. I do have an important travel tip for Bill Murray if he does go to Gettysburg. That's do not go to Pickett's restaurant because of the extra charge.
What?
Extra charge?
Oh, Pickett's
I got
charge.
it. I got it.
Oh, man.
Oh, boy. Let me just see here.
We deserve it. We deserve it.
That's good.
Yeah, no, we clearly deserve that. All right. Let's go to Jen. Jen, what's your pick of the week, please, ma'am?
And that is how our chat is the whole show. Is that.
That's the whole 2 hours right there.
That's exactly. First of all, I was so encouraged by if history were taught in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten. That is, I'm going to have to just start using that because that is what we do at Tornado Talk. And my pick of the week is I've been producing every week like a longer This Week in Tornado History on Spotify. So I'm trying to get some of our stories out on audio. So I've been doing 7 different events, but this week I did something a little different, and I went ahead and just focused on one event, the Ivy Meacham's River, Virginia F3 tornado from September 30th, 1959. And I read the story, and it's just 15 minutes. It's what we've already written on our website, and there's a lot more on the website. But this story is just heartbreaking. 11 fatalities and 10 in one family. And we were able to get a lot of information on what happened and then some follow-ups on the survivors a year later and some of the history. And really, the story is very powerful. And in November, I'm actually going to be going to Virginia. I'm going to go to the Mid-Atlantic Severe Weather Conference, and we'll be staying east of Charlottesville. We're going to be doing some history. And I told Zach today, I said, I want to go trace this tornado. I want to go back and see if we can find where some of these locations were, where was the farm, where the homes were hit, and just see if we can find a few things and just take some photos and just go walk where people were. That's what's been one of the most meaningful things about the Guin stories. I've been back now 4 times, and we have driven through and driven the path. And it can really feel more connected by doing that. So anyway, if you have 15 minutes, you can go listen to the story on our Spotify channel.
Indeed.
We'll put the links up on WeatherBrains.
Version of it, so you can watch it tomorrow on the Alabama Weather Network, because Jen wrote it up for me as a weather history story, and I'm doing it tomorrow as our weather history story.
Yay.
Good deal. All right, John Gordon, let's see if those earbuds will crank it up one more time. What you got?
I'm sorry, James. I'm going to get this fixed. All right. So, weather history 40 years ago, Dr. Neese, Gloria, the WSO and Hatteras launched the weather balloon in the eye of Gloria, first time ever. But my pick of the week is the Hurricane Center. You should be reading the Tropical Active Discussion, the TCD. They've been talking about a sting jet. Okay.
Yeah.
I was never taught about the sting jet when I was in college. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a bumblebee. But anyway, you could learn about the narrow corridor of those winds. UK Met Office has got a great page and video. Watch it to learn about the sting jet. Don't be stung. Pay attention.
Louis was talking about it 3 weeks ago here on this show.
Yep.
He was. Goodness, Hurricane Gloria. That brings back memories. This was in 1985, John, I think. But before it kind of ran up the East Coast, that was that odd morning where I remember I was at the house. We had a newborn. I was in Dallas, and the news director called at 10 o'clock and said I had a live shot that evening on the 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock news. And I said, great, where? He said, the National Hurricane Center. I said, yeah, right, where? The National Hurricane Center. They had a Lear jet waiting for me at the Addison Airport. This is how much money TV stations made back in the 80s. They didn't know what to do with it. Of course, this had nothing to do with Dallas, but they flew me to the National Hurricane Center. I was live at 6 and 10. They flew me back. That was a different world back in those days. All right, Kim, what's your pick of the week? Go.
So my pick of the week is from hurricane specialist Brian McNulty. He had a great post a couple of days ago when it looked like the Fujiwara effect may be part of this story. And it's a really nice thread that kind of talks about the different varieties of Fujiwara effects, depending on the size of each of the players, how close they are, how far apart, and then different kinds of things can happen to them. We're getting a little bit of the slingshot version, then eventually it's going to become a merger. But there's an interesting variety. So something really great to check out if you're interested.
Good deal. Again, this will be up on weatherbrains.com. And my pick, it's some of the Hurricane Hunter video from these amazing men and women that fly these flights into one of the storms here recently. Just an incredible piece of video. And again, that'll be on weatherbrains.com. And I think we lost John and Jeff, right? They had to drop off. So, Bill Murray, I will turn the floor over to you for your pick of the week.
Yeah, my pick of the week. James, do you recognize this? What is
Rickwood
this?
Field, the
Yeah,
oldest professional ballpark in America, Birmingham,
that's a
Alabama.
replica of the
Fenway is
scoreboard.
number 2.
That's right. And James has just completed Spanning Alabama for our network, which is our human interest story feature that we run. And he just has completed one about Rickwood, and it's fascinating. It debuted today. So that's going to be my pick of the week. I sent it over, the YouTube link to it. And really, he's got one about a lightning victim, which is very appropriate given our conversation that we just had. And it's just as fascinating, but I think I'll save it for next week, James, because that is a tremendous story too, about that gentleman that was struck by lightning at Gunnersville, and his injuries were gruesome at best.
Yeah, horrible.
And had a near-death experience, and just he didn't even realize how badly he was hurt until he got to UAB and heard them calling for the trauma for this and trauma for that and trauma for that, because he was so severely injured. Lightning is an extremely dangerous thing, and I'm glad you said that, James. Whoever this is saying we've got too many lightning delays is delusional.
I want to tease our future guests.
And we are out of guests, James. We have no more guests. So
we're done. It's over.
It's over.
We've ended the show.
We've run out of guests. Yeah. We reached the end. So I've got to get to work. So anybody got suggestions? I'm going to dig through all of our old suggestions we have, and I'll be putting in the midnight oil for the next week to make sure we have some new guests. So don't worry. We'll get some
ideas.
Email. Do what, John?
I got some ideas for you, Bill.
Oh, yeah, good.
Call me tomorrow,
good.
John. We need to get together. We'll pair up and we'll work together on this.
Awesome.
And I
So
say that I know John has the show on November 10th. I'm outside of that. We've got guests lined up for that night, and I've got some folks who want to help that night too, John. If you're okay with it, but I'll tell you about that when we get together.
awesome. Well, listen, we're going to kind of put a bow on this one. If you're new here, we're on the air every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. You can watch this live on YouTube, youtube.com/weatherbrains. Most of you listen to the produced audio version. If you watch, listen, whatever, thank you. If you're new, we're glad you're here. If you've been with us a long time, thanks for your loyalty. We've been here for 1,028 episodes, and we turn 20 years old in January. How about that? But if you want to give a guest suggestion, ask a question, get in touch with us, just send us an email. It's email@weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Looks like the Beverly
All
Hillbillies
right.
at the end when they come out the door, and
They're just
everybody's
waving.
Yeah.
Or just
Y'all
wave.
come back
Yeah.
now. You hear?
Yeah. Texas tea. All right.